Nigeria's stock market continues to outperform, up over 43% this year, driven by strong corporate earnings and sector rallies from banking to telecoms. As Q3 financials trickle in and bargain hunting continues to hold sway, let's find out how investors are positioning today. Chinazom Izuora, Senior Associate-Investment Brokerage at Parthian Securities, joins me to discuss what's driving sentiment for the equities markets. Chinazom, Q3 numbers around the corner, and then we're seeing expected inflation slowdown and more FPI inflows. How's the sentiment in the market so far?
Well, in the month of October, it's actually been lower than previous months, so we've seen lower volumes and values. But we are all looking for those Q3 numbers. The performance, what we see in the Q3 numbers, is going to drive what's going to happen for the rest of the year. So far, we've seen very strong performance from the industrial goods companies, the consumer goods companies. For the bank, they seem to be performing in line with previous year. So we're really looking for those Q3 numbers to see whether they're going to do better than last year or perform in line. So I think everybody's being cautious right now just to see what those numbers are going to look like.
Before I take you on the banks, let's look at the results from Geregu and Transcorp. In line with what the debts that the federal government, 4 trillion naira debts that was recently agreed upon in terms of settling and how the government is going about it, this in a way has affected in terms of gas supplies and the likes to this listed companies, for example, for Geregu and Transcorp. But Transcorp is posting about 38% rise in revenue, and looking at how all this play out, how solid do you think these results can maintain in terms of closing the year?
It's interesting that two of them are the first to submit. They're in the same industry. What we've seen in their financials, like you mentioned, improved revenue. But we've also seen higher operating expenses, higher administrative expenses. We believe that improved revenue has a lot to do with the tariffs, the fact that the electricity tariffs were revised. We've also seen a lot of concerted efforts in that industry to improve collections. So those are things that are likely to boost revenue in that industry. Similar with Geregu, we did see Geregu do slightly better than previously. Although, like I mentioned, higher operating expenses, higher administrative expenses continue to impact their numbers. So we expect that they're going to continue performing in line. I think comparatively, Transcorp's number was a little bit better, but we'll keep watching to see how their full year numbers are going to turn out.
I mean, tier one banks are also doing quite impressive in terms of their numbers. And like you said, we're expecting Q3 numbers to show how solid these gains are. But what are your expectations in terms of how the sector would perform?
So there's been a massive rally in the banking sector already this year. And another thing to keep in mind is those public offers and those additional shares that they just issued, right?
Are also increasing.
Yes, it's increasing their shares outstanding. So one of the main considerations, because Nigerian investors like their dividends, so there's that consideration of whether they are going to be able to maintain it. And we know that last year, in a bid to incentivize investors to participate, we did see them be very generous with their interim and their final dividends. It might bite them a little bit if they're not able to maintain it. But of course, long-term investors are going to continue to see value in that sector.
Let me put you on the spot. In terms of the tier one banks, which of them do you think would give higher dividends, for the year end? We've seen interim dividend coming, and why do you think that would drive that? I'm sure a lot of investors will want to know why.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of investors are looking at the dividends. We already know, we know the best paying, and so Zenith Bank particularly prides itself on maintaining its dividend payout. They've been consistent over the years. They recently had an engagement with NGX, and they promised to do better.
Quantum.
They promised to do better. So with the banks, we expect them to remain consistent, try and maintain their previous patterns. But of course, another thing that's impacted our sector this year has been a lot of the CBN directives. We've seen CBN comments on their loans. We've seen CBN comment on the single obligor limits. So that's also something to watch with the banks. Who's complying, who's within allowable limits, and how is that going to affect their ability to compensate their investors.
Anyway, we'll see how the year wraps up, particularly when Q3 numbers come out. Thank you very much, Chinazom. That was Chinazom Izuora, Senior Associate Investment Brokerage at Parthian Securities.